Hey guys, here's your introduction to Gantt charts. This is what we're going to talk about today. It's going to be an introduction to Gantt charts. We're going to talk about working planning aids. We're going to show you how to construct a Gantt chart. We're going to talk about staffing and rescheduling, and then finally, we'll go over the project management tools. So if you see this symbol during the lesson, copy that information into your notebook. Make sure to title that page as Gantt chart notes and put the date that you took the notes. So where did Gantt charts come from? Well, it was first introduced by Henry Gantt around 1910. And so as the name says, Gantt chart invents it, he gets to name it. So Henry Gantt was a mechanical engineer and management consultant who developed an organizational system for managing complex projects. So the Gantt charts have become a common technique for representing the phases and activities of a project work breakdown schedule. And that's going to be very important, the work breakdown schedule. That's where Gantt charts really shine. So what do Gantt charts do? Well, number one, they assess how long a project should take. Number two, they lay out the order in which tasks need to be carried out, and that's very important. And so when you're looking at your timelines and your Pert charts, you're taking that information and then you're laying it out in which tasks are critical tasks and non-critical tasks. Number three, they help manage dependencies between tasks. So you have a visual of which tasks are dependent upon other tasks. Number four, you determine the resources needed. And number five, it really helps you monitor that progress. So a Gantt chart is a type of bar chart that illustrates a project schedule. If we look at the example below, you can see the tasks are on the left-hand column and the dates are on the top. Now you may see Gantt charts with the dates on the bottom. It doesn't matter. Gantt charts, the tasks are always going to be on the left-hand side. The dates can be on the top or the bottom. And you can see how they run together. So you can see which tasks are started when, and you can see that there's going to be simultaneous tasks going at the same time in this particular chart. So after the project analysis, that's your timeline and your Pert chart, is completed, the next phase is to construct the Gantt chart and then to reallocate resources and reschedule if necessary. This really gives you that big picture of what resources are needed when, and if you have enough time, resources, and personnel to complete those tasks when you want to complete them. So here's a list of work planning aids. And so where do Gantt charts fit in? Well, once you complete your timelines and your Pert charts, the next thing you're looking at is your project phases. Now, once you've assessed your project phases, that is the completion of your project analysis, then you're going to complete a Gantt chart. And as you're completing your Gantt chart, that's when you're going to figure out when your critical activities and non-critical activities are happening. So timelines show when tasks take place. For example, in this example, you can see when the project is assigned, when your proposal is due, when your first phase prototype is finished, when you finish your testing, when you finish your product demonstration, and your final report is due. And so you're coming up with this timeline when you're doing your project analysis. Once you finish with your timeline, then you're going to construct a Pert chart. And a Pert chart shows dependencies between tasks, the order that they take place. So for example, if you look at this chart right here, you can see that where our beginning phase takes place, and then you can see how certain tasks have dependencies on other tasks, right? So you cannot start your brainstorm programming strategy until you finish your brainstorm robot design. Once you finish your brainstorm robot design, your brainstorm program strategy and your prototype drivetrain solutions are happening at the same time. You can also see that on the bottom, you have your build test bed, and that is another task that's happening simultaneously with your brainstorming. And so this gives you that real idea of when these tasks are taking place and which tasks are dependent on other tasks. So understanding your project life cycle phases. So projects typically have 5 phases. conception, initiation, planning, execution, performance and control, and then closing. Now, sometimes you may see execution and performance and control combined, and in those cases, it will be brought down to four phases, but typically it is 5 phases. So, where does the Gantt fit in? Well, if you look at this chart right here, you have your 5 phases, and you can see that the Gantt chart is under phase number 2, which is your project definition and planning. So once you have your scope and budget, your work breakdown schedule, you're ready to start that Gantt chart. And as we've discussed before, part of that work breakdown schedule and the planning you're going to be doing before you start your Gantt chart is you're going to be coming up with that timeline first and then the Pert chart. So here's an example of that Gantt chart. Again, when we're looking at our left-hand column, you have all your different tasks, and then your top or bottom is going to have your timeline. So the purpose of the Gantt chart is to organize and sequence the steps involved in a project. It's used by engineers and project managers to ensure that certain components of a project occur in a specific sequence. Sequencing ensures that all components that are required by subsequent components are completed so that no delays or errors occur. So if you look at this example, you see that there are several tasks, task 1, 2, 3, and 4, that will be happening simultaneously, right, through between the 26th and the 30th. So that means there's going to be roughly 4 days of tasks that are 4 days where tasks will be happening simultaneously. And it happens again, right? So you have task 3, 4, 5, and 6 starting roughly on the 1st of August through the 6th or through the 4th of August, you'll have all those tasks going on simultaneously again. And so this is a real big planning tool that allows you to look at what tasks are happening when, and then you can allocate resources to those tasks, and you can also allocate the personnel required for those tasks, which becomes a huge deal in project planning. So here's a little more complex Gantt chart. So the characteristics, the bar in each row identifies the corresponding task. The horizontal position of the bar identifies start and end times of the task. Bar length represents the duration of the task so that task durations can be compared easily. It's good for allocating resources and rescheduling. Precedence relationships can be represented using arrows. Critical activities are usually highlighted. And you can see there where we have our red and we have our blue arrows, they highlight critical tasks. Slack times are represented using bars and dots. And so if you look at our example, you can see that there's slack times on task F, on task B, on task H. So all those hashtag areas are slack times. The bar of each activity begins at the activity's earliest start time, and the bar of each activity ends at the activity's latest finish time. So earliest start time is usually noted by the acronym ES, capital ES, and the finish time is usually noted by the acronym LF, so latest finish. So if you look at this example here, you can see that we have several different tasks that are happening simultaneously. You can see which tasks are critical tasks, right? And you can see which tasks are non-critical tasks. So the critical tasks are labeled by red and the non-critical tasks are labeled by blue. And you can see how they intertwine and work together. So advantages. So the biggest advantage is that it's very simple. It's very simple to lay out and it's very simple to put together. It's good visual communications to others. So if others are looking at it, they can tell when tasks begin, when tasks end, and which tasks are going to be going on simultaneously. The task durations can be compared easily, and it's good for scheduling resources. The disadvantages our dependencies are a little bit more difficult to visualize. So we don't know exactly which tasks are dependent on others unless you note that somewhere on the chart. And then minor changes in data can cause major changes in the chart. And so if you have, for example, if you have a task that takes 10 people to complete and 3 of those people are no longer available, then you have made major data changes. You cannot complete that task on time, and you're going to have to shift either personnel or resources from other tasks in order to complete that task. So, constructing a Gantt chart, step number 1 is to schedule the critical tasks in the correct position based on your project phases. And the project phases are outlined in your Pert chart and timeline. Your critical tasks and the critical path are linked by dependencies. One job has to finish before the next one starts. And so in this example, the critical tasks are going to be labeled in blue. And so our critical tasks for here are B, D, and G. Step number 2 is to place the windows in non-critical tasks. So non-critical tasks are those activities or work items that can take longer to complete than is planned without affecting the total project duration. So if tasks A, C, E, or F take longer than it's planned, it doesn't affect the critical tasks. And you can see here our non-critical tasks are labeled in white. Step number 3 is to schedule your non-critical tasks at the earliest starting times. And step number 4 is to indicate precedence relationships between those tasks. And so you can see here, we took our scheduled non-critical tasks in A, C, E, and F, and we showed where those relationships are, right? So A doesn't start till time A's non-critical tasks does not start until 3. So that means everything in A that is prior to time 3 is a critical task. Okay, and then you can also see that we were indicating precedence relationships by our dashed lines. So this is for your review. I want you to write this down. So these are the 4 steps that we just talked about, right? Step number 1 is to schedule the critical tasks in the correct position based on your project phases, your Pert chart, and your timeline. Critical tasks and the critical path are linked by dependencies. One job has to finish before the next one starts. Step number 2, place the time windows in which the non-critical tasks can be scheduled. Non-critical tasks are those activities or work items that can take longer to complete than is planned without affecting the project duration. Step number 3 is schedule the non-critical tasks according to their earliest start times. And then step number 4, indicate precedence relationships between tasks. So go ahead and write these down, and we will continue on. So staffing and resources. So once the project schedule has been constructed, you need to take into account available staff hours, slack times, and the project schedule. So slack times, in case we didn't go over that before, is the professional term used in project management to help people figure out just how much time is available between the various steps of a project. It tells you just how much time you have to start a project to keep the project on time. So that's what is noted by slack time. Again, professional term used to project management to help people figure out just how much time is available between the various steps of a project. Tells you just how much time you have to start a project to keep the project on time. So staffing and rescheduling, assign staff and other resources to each activity in the project. So that is going to be one of the steps that we have to do. So in this example right here, we have that original schedule from above that we've talked about before. And now we're showing our tasks, our durations, and then our staff needed. Okay, so you can see for task A, our duration is going to be up to time 3, right? And then our staff needed would be 2. For task B, our duration is up to time 4, and our staff needed would be 4. So that means for both A and B to be running simultaneously, we would need 6 staff to complete that. So now, if we say that in time 2, we assume that there's 6 people to work, and we say that in time 2, we have an emergency, that takes 2 staff away. So this would bring the available workers down to 4. However, both A and B require 6 to be running at the same time. So at that point, tasks A and B would not be able to be carried out in parallel at this time too. So we have 2 people that left, and now we have to reschedule and think about how we're going to come up with the available project timeline because we've lost 2 staff that are required. And so this is an example of rescheduling, which is when activities cannot be carried out in parallel due to staffing shortages. And so that's when you have to go back with your planning staff and you have to figure out which task is priority and which task is non-priority. So that's critical and non-critical. And then can we continue with task B because it is the critical task? And then task A is that non-critical task. So can we slack on that task A? So this is where you're going to go back to your team and you're going to be working through and rescheduling tasks, resources, and personnel. So the project management tools, and we've talked about most of these. Number 1 is the timeline. That's the first thing that you need to come up with. Number 2 is the Pert Chart. That's where we're coming up with our dependencies. And then once you have your timeline and your Pert Chart, you're going to combine those 2 together, and that's where we're coming up with that Gantt chart. Okay, when we come up with that Gantt chart, we're also going to be allocating our critical activities. So tasks that need to be completed on time in order for the project to be completed on time. And then we'll also be completing our non-critical tasks, which are tasks that are not dependent on time. So other project management tools are software. So when you start looking through some of the different software applications, Microsoft Excel has predetermined Gantt charts, and you can watch those and you can fill in those very easily. So at this time, there are some additional notes that you will need to be taking. Other than that, that is all I have for this presentation. You guys have a great day, and we will talk to you later.